What's up, guys? The 2023 official salary cap number has been updated by the NFL, and there are a lot of different numbers floating around when it comes to the Chicago Bears cap space. Today, I'm going to break down how much cap space we actually have, how much more cap space we can easily get, and why Ryan Poles has to spend at least $240 million this off season. Hang with me, I'm going to break it all down. Let's get right into it. Initially, reports projected the Bears to have around $120 million in salary cap. Then recent reports had that number around $93 million, and fans got worried. The official number after this year's cap raise is $98 million of cap space available to the Chicago Bears. Let me first explain why the number is different, and then I will tell you why the number is technically higher than that and how we can get it much higher. First off, the cap space went down because of some moves that were made. Ryan Poles extended Equanimeous St. Brown, and he signed 8 players to futures contracts. Those contracts are worth around $1 million a piece, so that's about $8 million in cap space, but those numbers go away if they don't make the 53-man roster, so those numbers aren't final yet, but are going against the cap right now. Also, Riley Reiff earned $4.5 million in incentives based on his playtime last year, and we had 6 draft picks earn raises of over $1 million based on performance escalators. Okay, so that is why the number dropped down to $98 million, but we still have to spend $240 million this offseason. And you're probably wondering how. I'll get into that in just a moment, but before I do that, let me break down why it's very easy for the Bears to get to $120 million in cap space without cutting any starters. All Ryan Poles needs to do is get rid of Trevor Siemian, Al-Quadin Muhammad, Nsimba Webster, and some of the guys on future contracts like Adrian Colbert, Greg Stroman, Jalen Holmes, Doris Fountain, and others that I don't see making the roster next year anyway. Boom! Just like that, we're up to $120 million in cap space. It's that easy, and that's the point of this offseason, is flexibility, cap space, and draft capital. And then if you want to go further, say if Ryan Poles wants to cut someone like Cody Whitehair, that would put us near $128 million. Cutting Justin Jones would put us over $130 million in cap space. So don't buy into the numbers that you hear floating around. The cap is fluid, and the most important thing is that we have plenty of cap space, more than any other team in the entire league, by a lot, and we have to spend a ton of money this year to avoid fines or loss of draft picks. Now I will explain that with the help of PFF Brad, who broke it down very nicely on Twitter. Let's get right into it. Bears will easily be the biggest spenders this year in free agency. I know Ryan Poles' philosophy is to build through the draft, and that will happen. But this year is different. The Chicago Bears have to reach a salary cap floor, and in order to do that, have to spend around $240 million this offseason. Now, most of you will ask, how can we spend $240 million when we only have around $100 million in cap space? Well, I'm going to break that down for you. So there's a difference between cap space and money spent. The Jaguars spent way more money than they had cap space last year. It's easy to do that if you sign a couple big-time free agents because you give them big signing bonuses. So just an example of a signing bonus. Say you give someone a $30 million bonus on a 4-year contract. They would get $30 million up front, but the GM can spread that bonus over the 4 years of the contract or even longer, which means a guy could get $100 million and only count $9 or $10 million against the salary cap. The biggest point is Ryan Poles has to spend $240 million of cash this offseason. Now, there are other ways that he's going to spend cash. It's not all going to come from free agency. A top 5 pick itself is going to cost around $20 million. And I also expect Ryan Poles to extend a number of players on the roster already. Guys like Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool, Cole Kmet, and Jalen Johnson are all eligible for extensions. I will talk about the likelihood of those guys getting extensions at some other point in the offseason, but I think all four at least have a possibility of being re-signed. It should be a done deal that Cole Kmet gets re-signed, and then I would definitely try to extend either Mooney or Claypool before this next season as well. So basically, it's possible for Poles to spend around $100 million on extensions and signing draft picks, but that leaves about another $140 million to spend in free agency. And that can easily be done. The Jags last year spent over $120 million in free agency, so we should expect the Bears to have a similar spending spree as the Jags did last year. The difference is Poles has more flexibility in how he wants to spread that out across the roster. I expect a couple of big-time additions, and then I think he might bring in a wave of second-tier free agents to fill as many holes on this roster as he can. Shout out to PFF Brad. Anyone on Twitter, if you're interested in salary cap information, Brad is one of the best in the biz at explaining this stuff. Bottom line is, the Bears are going to be major players this offseason. We have the keys to the NFL draft. We have the most cap space in the NFL by a lot. And we have to spend roughly $240 million to hit the NFL's cash spending floor. Poles could spend a lot more than that if he wanted to. It's going to be a crazy offseason in Chicago. Buckle up, guys. I'll be here every step of the way. If you have any questions or there's something I didn't explain enough, ask me in the comments and I'll get into it. Remember to hit that like button for me. I appreciate everybody who watches. And until next time, bear down.